today on Car Traction, you join me on this, my 1927 CWS Path Racer bicycle. And in today's video, I'm going to be going on a wonderful spring ride on this vintage racing bicycle, and also discussing why I think, there's a fly just down there, why I think more people should get involved in these vintage bikes and why they're just absolutely brilliant. So let's get going on today's ride. Right, well, I think before I start to discuss the many merits of owning a vintage bicycle like this, be it from something really early like the 1920s here up until the sort of 1960s and 70s era, and why I think they're great, let's talk a little bit about what I'm actually riding today. Now, this is mine for about 6 months, I think, my 1927 CWS Path Racer. Now, this thing, despite what it looks like, didn't actually start out life in such a racing form. So this thing, brand new in 1927, looked nothing like this. It was sold as a traditional sort of classic British roadster, heavy old bike, the sort of thing designed to be used for everyday use. And I think the previous owner, Simon, I don't know too much about the early history, but the previous owner who I bought it off last year found the original bike as an absolute wreck, but the frame was solid, so he got rid of a lot of the original parts and decided to create it into a sort of homage, a replica to the early vintage racing bicycles of the 1920s. In fact, when Simon acquired the original frame with all the rusty parts, he said he found these wonderful handlebars and then he just had a vision. That was a loud dog. Must have been interested by the white tyres or something. You do get a lot of looks on this thing. So what else is there about this vintage bike? So it's new wheels, new tyres, a few new things here and there, but it's all sort of period, new old stock stuff. You know, there's nothing that looks intrusive or too new on this thing, but it does retain many of its original parts. I think as much as Simon could keep, he did keep, such as the original, this is a bit bumpy, the original Sturmey Archer 3-speed gears on this one. Quite high geared when you get into top, that's top now, second there, and first there. And also this beautiful original steel frame, such wonderful feel from a steel frame on a bicycle like this, and it just looks the business. So now that you know a little bit more about what I'm actually riding on today, let's get on to my first point about why I think vintage bicycles are such a good purchase to make at the moment. So then, what is my first argument for why I think these things are such great purchases at the moment in 2025? And even though I'm riding something as old as 1927 in today's video, this applies for pretty much anything up to sort of 1980 or somewhere around there. And my first point is one that really doesn't need much explanation, and I think it's pretty obvious, to be honest, because look at this bike. I think it looks absolutely awesome, this thing. You know, the huge steel frame, the wonderful Lucas lamp that came with the bike on its little suspension there, wonderful handlebars, original style grips, you know, everything just looks so good on this bicycle. So a short argument, yes, but I think it goes without saying that when compared to something like a modern bicycle, something like this for a fraction of the price just looks so much cooler, doesn't it? Probably should have pedalled a bit harder going up this hill. Ugh. Right, nice downhill section now. This is always fun on an old bike. Now, an old bike like this, it's really heavy, which means that really horrible going uphill, but going downhill you can really get some speed up. Now, this road is quite bumpy, so I won't be going too fast on it today because I don't want the camera to rattle around too much. But at least it's nice and quiet so we can mind our own business. I've done this ride many times. It's a roughly sort of 12-15 mile loop, somewhere in between those, on all of my vintage bicycles. I've got 3 now. The first one, the 1952 CWS, which is a traditional English roadster, big heavy thing, which is what this would have started life out as. And then I got this thing, and then more recently I invested for £70 in a FH Grub bicycle, which is another sort of racing touring bike, but it's not quite as hardcore as this one. Yeah, what a great day we have for a vintage bicycle ride. Right, so what is my second argument for riding a vintage bicycle like this? And usually when you watch these videos, people give the sort of the pros and cons of it, and I think many of the cons are actually pros, because it's the same thing with vintage cars really. Some of the annoying things, let's go through them. Say you got a gear shifter that it's got 3 gears, it's not any good at hills. This is quite worn in fact actually, so you have to sort of finesse it a little bit. That's the word, I don't know. It's heavy, it's very slow when compared to modern bicycle technology. It needs regular maintenance, like something like the crank, the gears, they regularly need oiling. But to be honest, for me, that's part of the fun of owning such an old thing like this. I absolutely love doing all the maintenance jobs on this bicycle. And yeah, in many respects, it's like owning a vintage car really. It's a lot more difficult, but when they're right, when this bicycle is right, and look, it's absolutely silent, they're just absolutely wonderful. Not quick, but you can keep up with various other cyclists. And yeah, they're just, when they're right, they're absolutely wonderful. So many of the negative aspects of owning a vintage bicycle that people say, I actually consider to be more positive aspects of veteran cycling. Because don't you just love the, well, at least I do, I love the challenge of owning something like this, and now I own 3. So can I think of anything else that makes these bikes so different and much more exciting and a challenge than riding just some modern aluminium frame or carbon fibre frame, you know, just something modern and just built for speed like that. It goes without saying that these are a lot more affordable. You get such big bang for your buck on these vintage bikes. eBay, Facebook Marketplace, Gumtree, fantastic places to find them. But you know, they're really comfy to ride as well, if not a bit slow, and you have to be quite often changing gear. There's a downhill section coming up, which will save my legs a little bit, but after that, one of the most uphill sections of the ride, so you know, swings and roundabouts. Yeah, such a comfy thing to ride this. That's one of the more hardcore sort of categories of vintage bikes, being a racing bike, still dead comfortable. Something like my 1952, you sat bolt upright, it's unbelievably comfortable. Could sit on that thing for hours, but you know, this is still pretty good to be honest, and it's great fun to ride. Now you're going to see one of the main things that people don't like about old bikes, where the weight factor starts to come in. Very uphill section up ahead. And I've gone into quite a headwind here as well, which isn't the best, but it'll get up there fine. See, everyone's nice to you and gives you plenty of space on an old bike like this. If you're razzing around on something modern, no one likes you, you get in the way. But on something like this, they're all very impressed, all the people. If they do or don't know about bikes, even to people who don't know about bikes, this thing looks pretty impressive. Oh, big hill. Oh, we even got a flood today. Didn't think that I'd be here in what, March is it now? take it nice and slow through here. This thing's got no mud guards, so I don't want to spray up on the old frame. The eagle-eyed of you may also notice that this bike has no brakes, and that is because, while originally this would have had probably rod brakes built up as a racer, this thing has what is called a coaster brake. So it's an internal brake encased in the rear hub in the rear wheel, and if I sort of, well, I'm not going to brake up a hill, so I'll wait until I go up the hill. Yeah, as opposed to using brakes normally like that, you just sort of apply a very slight backward pressure on the pedals, and to be honest, it's quite an efficient method of braking, as you can see. It's had modern Dutch wheels put on this as well, so that also helps. It's almost like a resto mod, isn't it? Vintage core with the old frame, but slightly more modern parts to improve its rideability, and it certainly does ride pretty well, this thing. I absolutely love it. I'm sure in this video as well, you'll have seen this thing bobbing around. This is a Lucas Leader oil lamp. I haven't tried it out, but originally this would chuck some oil in it, strike a match, and then that would put a sort of very, very dim glow onto the road ahead of you. I probably will never try it out, but it certainly looks quite cool, and it's on the sort of suspension system, so it goes like that, no squeak at all. But look at that, how great is that? That's another thing people also love about this bike. Absolutely brilliant. Oh, this is bumpy. Got to pick your line carefully. There's no one around, so you can veer off slightly to go around the bumps. Downshift to first gear for the climb. I'll get back on the right side of the road. Don't worry, no one's behind me. There you go, you can actually keep up a good pace on these things. This is probably one of the second fastest after the FH Grub of my vintage bikes. The 52 CWS is not built for speed, but this thing, you can actually go quite quick on it. And one of the best things about vintage bicycles is the price point. The vintage bicycle market there's a lot of bikes out there, and it's very much a buyer's market because there's so many bikes for sale out there. If you look long enough, you can find yourself a real nice bike. Whether you're looking for a roadster, a racer, a touring bike, there's going to be loads on them in all online sites. Hopefully some of them will be near you to take a look at and maybe add to your growing collection. This thing was probably just about 20 miles from our home. Paid £140 for it, including this lamp, and I think it looks like it's worth so much more than that. It's just such a great looking thing for the money, I think. Other bikes, I paid £100 for the 52 CWS and £70 for my FH Grub, so if you look hard and long enough, you can get real bargains out there. And yeah, it's just such an affordable way into cycling, such an affordable way to experience such a unique sort of niche of the cycling world. What an absolutely perfect day to ride a veteran bicycle like this. I mean, to ride any bike, you could say, but certainly something like this. At a slow speed, you can just enjoy your surroundings a lot more. Although, of course, this, as a racing bicycle, can actually go quite quick on it, and it does handle okay at high speed. It's got some really wide tyres on this bike. They can barely just fit between the forks, to be honest. I think they're the widest ones that Simon could have got when he renovated this thing. But they do look the part. The white tyres, just so eye-catching, aren't they? Nice little downhill section here. It's almost like the Eau Rouge Radion corner at Spa-Francorchamps, but quite a bit narrower. Thank you. See, everyone gives you loads of space because they're like, wow, what is that? If you were razzing along at sort of 35-40 mile per hour on a carbon frame bike in the world's tightest lycra, no one would have any time for you. But you just sort of be patient on a bicycle. At the end of the day, if you have a crash, you're going to come off worse. But if you do have a crash, something like a steel frame's a lot more likely to survive a lot better. Really strong frame. Carbon fibre, brittle, aluminium can bend quite easily. This thing is strong. Whew, quite out of breath now. Lucky we're going down a downhill section again now. Whew. It's harder than I thought talking and riding a bicycle at the same time. There's someone behind me now, so I'll just slow down and wave them past. Don't want to be getting in anyone's way. Yeah, a perfect example of the merits of riding a bicycle that's not as quick as the usual things. Has just happened to me now, just down the road. I was going slow enough that I could peer into someone's garage. And in their garage was a vintage Lagonda, a vintage MG, I think a vintage Aston Martin, and I think a vintage AC. All pre-war cars, absolutely gorgeous. Incredible find, never would have guessed it's there. But if I was riding something faster, I wouldn't have seen all those beautiful vintage cars. So, you know, many, many benefits to the things you see on something like this. And of course, if you're trying to talk to someone with all those things, this is one heck of a conversation starter. They'll be a lot more interested in talking to you if you turn up on something like this when compared to some boring modern bike. So that is my very, very confusing probably and waffly list of why I think vintage bikes are just absolutely great and certainly a thing to look into. If you're into modern cycling, just try one of these things for about 100 quid. We'll get you a nice old racer. Just try it, you won't regret it. If you enjoyed today's video, then please do let me know in the comments, and you've got to subscribe because I am absolutely out of breath on this heavy bike trying to talk about bikes at the same time. So you've got to subscribe. Check out the channel homepage for more vintage bicycle and vintage car related videos. And yeah, that's it for today's video, and thank you very, very much for watching.